And for this class, on class 5 for youth exercise programming, you'll need to read the position stand on resistance training and reviewing the evidence for use. And you'll also need to review the article about working with overweight use. We'll be doing some class discussion on that, and we'll also talk about case studies for exercise programming for use. So we'll be broken up into groups. So let's talk about the differences between kids and adults. They really are not just little adults. In some ways, they are similar to adults, but in other ways, they are very different. Obviously, they're smaller for the most part. Children are smaller. They don't have the same maturity and mental ability. They tend to have a lesser attention span. So the things that we would do that would be very interesting to us, like going on, say, a treadmill with an iPad for an hour, they really don't want to do that. Same thing with their maturity level. They may not take any kind of challenge or type of games. They may not handle that well. And if you're dealing with children that have special populations, such as certain childhood diseases, we'll talk about congenital heart defects in this class. We'll cover asthma, cystic fibrosis, other disabilities in future classes. So there definitely are some anatomical and muscle differences with kids. If you look at, say, a silhouette of a child versus an adult, they're going to have a larger head and trunk versus their extremities. Then as they grow, that starts to even out. It's interesting in that their muscle mass, about 40 to 46% of total body weight is muscle mass. And for women, that stays the same. So from age 5 to 29 in females, about half their body weight is muscle mass. And it increases from 42 to 53% in males. So males undergo a very large increase in muscle mass as they go through puberty. Children tend to have more type 1 muscle fibers, so that would, they'd be better at endurance type of work, not as good as high intensity work. They're not going to have the ability to hypertrophy their muscles as well. So they're going to use a little less glycogen in their high intensity work. So, a little bit less lactate production. And there may be lower activity of phosphofructokinase, or PFK, which limits high intensity in glycolysis. With children in neurological differences, their motor control gradually improves with age. And the second point is really key, is kids develop their mature movement patterns during their elementary school years. So that's kicking, throwing, etc. So if kids don't really develop those skills during those times, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to develop those as an adult. So that really makes the case of why we need some really good high quality PE teachers in the schools, because that is the optimum time to develop mature movement patterns. With kids, what we found is that they tend to have a low attention span. Their language skills, they may not be able to express themselves quite as well, and they may interfere with exercise testing and programming, especially when you're working with really little kids and kids with disabilities. Kids just don't have the vocabulary, the expression, the understanding. They really don't know what's going on. And we'll do an entire class on neuromuscular diseases like muscular dystrophy. So it's incredibly interesting to see exercise changes in kids that have chronic diseases. Kids also have a lesser ability to dissipate body heat. They don't have a mature temperature regulation mechanism until they reach the puberty. So, as you know, kids don't have to shower and bathe quite as much until they reach puberty. They're not going to sweat as much. They sweat much lower despite having more sweat glands. They're also going to get hotter before they begin to sweat. So the heat exchange from the environment is greater in children, so they can be at more risk of heat-related illnesses. So they have a lesser heat and cold tolerance. And of course, dehydration increases risk of heat-related illnesses in all these kids.